She stood in the downpour with 3 little kids clutching her legs, while her husband's parents tossed the last of their stuff onto the soaking pavement. Sarah Martinez observed her mother-in-law, Margaret, hurling a trash bag packed with her kids' clothing into the expanding pile on the cement. 6-year-old Emma pressed her face into Sarah's threadbare coat, her tiny frame trembling from freezing air and terror. 4-year-old Lucas gripped his twin sister Sophia's palm so firmly his knuckles turned pale. "You should have considered your kids before you had the nerve to challenge me," Margaret hissed. Her flawlessly arranged silver hair somehow remained dry despite the November downpour. 23 years I've provided a home above your thankless head, and this is my reward." Sarah's throat ached with statements she couldn't speak. Not with her kids observing. Not when she required to remain tough for them. The downpour drenched through her flimsy jacket, the one Margaret had reluctantly permitted her to retain from the charity pile 3 winters back. Everything else she possessed was now scattered across the pavement like garbage. Photo collections, the kids' drawings, Lucas's treasured toy dinosaur assortment, all drowning in filthy puddle liquid. "Please," Sarah murmured, her tone scarcely heard over the downpour. "At minimum, let me retrieve their educational uniforms. They have classes tomorrow." Margaret's spouse, Robert, materialized in the entrance of the 2-level colonial residence, the identical residence where Sarah had invested the previous 5 years washing floors, preparing meals and nurturing her kids in a transformed underground storage chamber. His expression was granite, his arms folded over his costly sweater. "School," he cackled, a harsh noise that caused Emma to cry softly. "You believe they'll be attending Preston Academy without us covering the fees? You're even more dim-witted than our boy claimed you were." The reference to Daniel delivered a recognizable spike of anguish through Sarah's core. Her spouse had been absent for 5 years now, deceased in a building accident that departed her with 3 infants and no destination to travel. His parents had accepted her in, but their generosity arrived with a cost that expanded steeper daily. "Mommy!" Sophia pulled on her arm, her tone tiny and bewildered. "Why is grandmother discarding my dolly?" Sarah crouched in the downpour, drawing all 3 kids near. Their garments were already drenched completely. Emma's cough, the one that had been persisting for weeks because Margaret claimed medical appointments were excessively costly, rattled in her small chest. "We're traveling on an expedition," Sarah murmured, compelling her tone to remain level. "Recall how we discussed being courageous like the champions in your storybooks?" Lucas bobbed his head earnestly, his dark vision so resembling his father's, wide with confidence she didn't merit. How could she inform them that their expedition was houselessness, that their mother had ultimately fractured after years of being handled like an unpaid laborer and attempted to request a single day away to transport Emma to a free medical facility? The quarrel had commenced that sunrise in the cooking area. Sarah had been awake since 4:30, arranging breakfast for Robert and Margaret. Eggs prepared over easy, not a moment overdone. Wheat bread, with accurately 1 spoonful of imported preserve. Coffee at precisely 165 degrees. She'd already assembled the kids' midday meals, cautious to utilize solely the inexpensive components Margaret allocated for them, while the older couple's refrigerator platform remained loaded with delicacies. "Mrs. Morrison," Sarah had stated, utilizing the ceremonial title Margaret demanded upon despite being family. "Emma's cough is worsening. The free medical facility on Riverside has walk-in periods today." I was wishing. Margaret had positioned down her porcelain cup with intentional accuracy. "You were wishing to abandon your responsibilities. The washrooms won't sanitize themselves, Sarah. Neither will the laundry organize itself or the silver shine itself for tonight's supper gathering. I could transport her after you present supper to 12 visitors. After that, you sanitize up. That would be midnight. Genuinely, Sarah. Occasionally, I question if you value this family whatsoever." That's when something internal Sarah had fractured. 5 years of consumed statements. 5 years of being thankful for a fungus-filled underground chamber. 5 years of observing her kids consume remainders while their grandparents feasted on prime beef. 5 years of being informed she was fortunate that without them she'd be on the pavements, that she should appreciate God daily for their Christian generosity. "They're your grandkids," Sarah had stated, her tone quaking. "Daniel's kids. Doesn't that signify anything to you?" The quietness that pursued was thunderous. Margaret's expression had transformed the specific shade of violet that signified Sarah had traversed an unpardonable boundary. "Daniel," Margaret had stated gradually, was our boy, our accomplished, hopeful boy who discarded his existence away, wedding a nobody from the incorrect section of settlement. A female who couldn't even provide him boys to transport on the Morrison identity appropriately. And now you have the audacity to summon his recollection while abandoning the exact obligations we so charitably permit you to preserve. Permit me? Sarah's palms had tightened around the dish fabric. I labor 16 periods daily. I haven't possessed a day away in 2 years. I slumber in a chamber with visible tubes and dark fungus, while you possess 4 vacant sleeping chambers elevated. My kids consume peanut spread sandwiches for supper while you discard nourishment from your gatherings. I'm not your worker. I'm your daughter-in-law. The strike had arrived swift, Margaret's groomed palm connecting with Sarah's face with sufficient strength to rotate her cranium laterally. The cooking area had revolved, and for a moment Sarah tasted circulation where her teeth sliced her mouth tissue. You, Margaret had hissed, are nothing. Without us, you're simply another welfare situation with excessive mouths to nourish. And if you ever communicate to me that method once more, you'll locate out precisely how charitable we've been. But Sarah couldn't halt. 5 years of quietness had constructed up excessive pressure. Daniel would be humiliated of how you handle his kids, his daughters that you act don't exist. His boy that you won't even observe, because he reminds you of him. That had been 6 periods back. 6 periods before Robert arrived residence early from the recreation club. 6 periods before they pulled her from the underground while the kids were at educational facility, hurling everything they possessed into trash pouches. 6 periods before they'd collected the kids up from Preston Academy and informed them their mother was an ungrateful parasite who didn't merit their compassion. Now Sarah stood in the downpour, her kids' complete universe demolished because she'd ultimately located the bravery to communicate the reality. Depart our land, Robert stated from the entrance. If I observe you present in 5 minutes, I'm contacting the authorities, and don't consider about returning. We've already contacted the educational facility to eliminate the kids from registration. After all, we can't possess them associating with their appropriate companions when they're existing like wanderers. Their belongings, Sarah begged. Please, simply let me. Margaret appeared once more, this occasion transporting a photo collection. Sarah's core lurched. It was the sole collection she'd succeeded to rescue from the living space she'd distributed with Daniel. The sole pictures of him with the infants before the accident. Oh, you signify these? Margaret unsealed the collection and gradually, systematically commenced ripping out sheets, garbage, similar to everything else about your pathetic existence. No. Emma fractured free from Sarah's arms, splashing through puddles toward her grandmother. That's Daddy! Don't injure Daddy! Margaret gazed down at the 6-year-old with such frigidness that Emma halted in her tracks. Your daddy is deceased because he was dim-witted enough to labor a hazardous position to sustain your valueless mother. Recall that. Sarah scooped Emma up before she could process the harshness of those statements, maintaining her firm as the tiny female sobbed. Lucas and Sophia squeezed against her limbs, and she could sense them quaking through their drenched garments. 5 minutes, Robert repeated. Commencing now, Sarah gazed at the pile of their belongings scattered in the downpour. 5 years compressed into trash pouches. She seized what she could. A few changes of garments, the covering Sophia couldn't slumber without, Lucas's breathing device from the lateral pocket of a pouch. Her palms quaked as she pushed the items into a single trash pouch that wasn't completely drenched through. Mommy, where are we traveling? Lucas questioned, his tone level in that method that fractured her core. Her 4-year-old boy attempting to be the male of the family. To the vehicle, infant, she stated, hoisting the pouch over her shoulder and accepting Sophia's palm. We're traveling to the vehicle initially. The battered Honda Civic rested at the boundary, its previously blue coloring diminished to a boring gray. Daniel had obtained it utilized simply a month before the accident, pleased that he'd preserved sufficient for a family vehicle. Now it was all they possessed remaining. Sarah fastened the kids into their vehicle seats. At minimum, Margaret hadn't considered to discard those out and ascended into the operator's seat. Her palms quaked as she rotated the mechanism. The motor sputtered, coughed, then ultimately captured. The fuel indicator read simply under a quarter container, $15 in her billfold. 3 starving kids. No residents. She operated 2 sections before drawing into a vacant church parking area, her vision excessively obscured by tears to travel further. The kids were silent in the rear, that dreadful silence that signified they were frightened to create situations worse. Mommy, Emma's tone was minuscule. Are we traveling to exist in the vehicle now? Sarah gripped the guiding wheel until her knuckles ached. How did you inform a 6-year-old that yes, this corroded Honda with the fractured heater and openings that didn't completely seal was now their residence? How did you clarify that occasionally loving somebody wasn't sufficient to create them love you reverse? That circulation didn't constantly signify family. Simply for a brief duration, she murmured. Simply until Mommy calculates situations out. But she possessed zero concept how to calculate this out. No family of her personal. Her parents had perished when she was in higher education. No near companions. Margaret had ensured of that. Demanding Sarah was excessively occupied with household responsibilities to preserve friendships. No position history for the previous 5 years except unpaid labor in that residence. No references that wouldn't direct reverse to the individuals who'd simply discarded them out like garbage. The downpour drummed harder on the covering of the vehicle. Sophia commenced sobbing, a gentle hiccuping noise that activated her twin. Shortly, all 3 kids were sobbing, and Sarah could solely draw them clumsily over the seats, attempting to maintain them all simultaneously in the cramped area. "I'm frightened," Emma murmured into her neck. "I comprehend, infant. I comprehend." Sarah kissed the summit of her cranium, tasting rainwater and kids' hair cleanser, the inexpensive variety Margaret obtained in bulk. "But we possess each other, accurate? And as long as we possess each other, we're traveling to be acceptable." It was a falsehood. She comprehended it was a falsehood. They possessed half a container of fuel, 15, and nowhere to travel. Emma's cough was worsening by the period. The temperature was declining, and the vehicle's heater had halted functioning previous winter. They couldn't slumber in the vehicle. Somebody would contact the authorities and then child services. And then, she couldn't consider about that. Sarah's communication device buzzed. For a moment, aspiration flared. Perhaps Margaret had reconsidered. The communication was from an unknown digit, but she identified Robert's composing style immediately. "The mechanisms have been altered. Don't trouble returning. Any attempt to contact us will be regarded harassment. You created your selection." She eliminated the communication with quaking appendages. "Mommy, I'm starving," Lucas stated quietly. He'd consumed breakfast at 7 nigh that sunrise. It was now 4 Karn. Their midday containers were likely still positioned in the Educational Facility Bureau, deserted when Margaret had collected them with firm-mouthed rage. "I comprehend, darling." Sarah accomplished swift calculations. $15. 4 individuals. How lengthy could she extend that? A sunrise, 2? "We'll retrieve supper shortly. Acceptable?" She commenced the vehicle once more, operating aimlessly while the kids dozed fitfully in the rear. The protection she comprehended of would be occupied by now. The ones that weren't occupied didn't accept kids. She'd discovered that during her volunteer sunrises, reverse when Daniel was breathing, and they'd invested Thanksgiving's ladling soup for the less fortunate. How naive she'd been then, considering misfortune was something that occurred to other individuals. The fuel indicator declined lower. Sarah drew into a McDonald's parking area, calculating change from the cup container. $8.37. She could retrieve the kids something from the dollar selection. They'd have to distribute, but it would occupy their stomachs for tonight. Within, she maintained Sophia on her waist, while Emma and Lucas squeezed near to her flanks. Other families consumed their joyful meals and conversed about educational sunrises. "Normal families with residences to return to," Sarah requested cautiously. 2 burgers to divide 4 methods. 1 tiny fries to distribute. Water cups that she'd occupy with tap water. "That'll be $5.43, the adolescent cashier stated, gazing bored. Sarah transferred over the wrinkled bills, attempting not to consider about how tiny remained. The kids consumed gradually, relishing each bite in a method that created her core ache. When was the previous occasion they'd been genuinely occupied? Even at the Morrison residence, their portions had been meticulously regulated. Remainders from the principal table, if they were fortunate. An aged female at the subsequent table observed them with gentle vision. She captured Sarah's gaze and grinned tenderly before quietly departing a $20 bill on their table as she departed. Sarah's vision obscured once more. She desired to pursue after the female, to return it, to preserve some fragment of dignity. But dignity wouldn't nourish her infants. Appreciation. She murmured to the vacant atmosphere where the female had been. Reverse in the vehicle, darkness was descending. The downpour had halted, but the temperature persisted to decline. Sarah operated to a Walmart parking area she'd detected permitted overnight parking. The kids huddled united in the rear seat beneath the slim covering she'd succeeded to rescue, their respiration fogging in the frigid atmosphere. "Inform us a narrative." "Mommy," Emma requested, her cough punctuating the statements. "About when Daddy was present." Sarah's throat sealed. How could she inform them narratives about a father they scarcely recalled? How could she clarify that the grandparents who'd simply rejected them had previously bounced these identical kids on their limbs, reverse when Daniel was breathing to cushion their frigidness? "Your daddy," she commenced gently. Adored you beyond all the celestial bodies in the atmosphere. He used to claim that Emma was his sunshine, Lucas was his tiny warrior, and Sophia was his princess. What were you, Mommy? Sophia questioned drowsily. I was his complete universe, Sarah murmured, recalling Daniel's precise statements. And he was mine. She conversed until their respiration deepened into slumber, informing them about the father who'd labored double periods to obtain Emma her initial bicycle, who'd colored the nursery himself when the twins were born, gentle yellow because they'd desired to be astonished, who'd perished on an ordinary Tuesday, descending from framework because the building corporation sliced corners on security apparatus. The resolution from his death had traveled directly to covering medical expenses from the twins' premature birth. There had been nothing remaining when the Morrisons had proposed to accept them in. Sarah had considered it was sorrow that inspired their proposal. Now she comprehended superior. It had been guilt and the requirement to regulate their boy's inheritance, to eliminate the fragments of him they'd never acknowledged. Sarah verified her communication device. 9:30. The parking area was occupying with other vehicles, other existences in transition. She identified the appearance in some of the operators' expressions, that vacant exhaustion of individuals with nowhere else to travel. A complete concealed society of the displaced, invisible to the purchasers who'd return tomorrow. Her communication device battery was at 12%. She deactivated it to preserve strength. Tomorrow she'd require it to search for services, to attempt to locate assistance. Tonight there was nothing to accomplish but exist until sunrise. She ascended into the rear seat, compressing herself around the vehicle seats to draw her kids near. They stirred but didn't wake, instinctively coiling into her warmth. Emma's cough had quieted to a wheeze. Sarah squeezed her mouth tissues to each tiny forehead, verifying for fever. Cool for now. The openings fogged with their combined respiration. Sarah utilized her arm covering to eliminate a tiny section, gazing out at the darkness. Hidden in this metropolis, the Morrisons were accommodating their supper gathering. Margaret would be protesting about the inconvenience of having to employ temporary assistants. Robert would be informing his recreation friends how they'd ultimately resolved their charity situation difficulty. Did they consider about the kids whatsoever? Did Margaret recall Emma's cackle when she'd assisted her with a puzzle previous Christmas? Did Robert remember Lucas meticulously displaying him his drawings, frantic for approval that never arrived? Did either of them value that Sophia still questioned why Grandma didn't adore her? Sarah's jaw tightened. No, they didn't consider about any of it. To them, Sarah and her kids were simply reminders of Daniel's betrayal, his selection to wed underneath their expectations, to labor with his palms instead of positioning behind a workspace, to adore somebody they regarded unworthy. A security protector's illumination device traveled across their vehicle. Sarah maintained her respiration, but he progressed onward. Tomorrow they'd have to locate somewhere else. Tomorrow she'd have to calculate out how to access services without a location. Tomorrow she'd have to maintain her kids nourished, comfortable, protected, all while preserving the fiction that this was an expedition. But tonight, in this frigid vehicle in a Walmart parking area, Sarah Martinez maintained her 3 kids and created a fierce guarantee in the obscurity. They would exist this. She would locate a method, and someday, somehow, she would provide them the existence their father had envisioned, an existence where they were treasured, not tolerated. Adored, not utilized. The downpour commenced once more, tender now, tapping on the covering like a lullaby. Sarah sealed her vision, not to slumber but to rest. Tomorrow would arrive shortly sufficient, transporting fresh challenges she couldn't yet envision. But for now, in this moment, her kids were protected in her arms. And occasionally, that had to be sufficient. 3 weeks had elapsed since that initial darkness in the Walmart parking area. 3 weeks of Sarah Martinez discovering the invisible geography of destitution, which religious buildings distributed free morning meals on Tuesdays, which book repositories permitted you to remain all sunrise without interrogating, which fuel station washrooms were hygienic sufficient to provide her kids sponge washings. 3 weeks of observing her reserves diminish from $15 to nothing, existing on the compassion of nourishment banks and the occasional miracle of outsiders who squeezed wrinkled bills into her palm. The Honda had transformed into their cosmos. Emma's drawings blanketed the openings, crayon insects and rainbow residences that fractured Sarah's core with their hopefulness. Lucas had arranged their few belongings with military accuracy, each item in its appointed location. Sophia sang continuously, Tiny invented melodies about princesses who existed in fortresses constructed of vehicles. They were stationed behind a 24-period laundromat this Tuesday sunrise, the motor operating for warmth while Sarah rationed the final quarter container of fuel. Emma's cough had developed into respiratory infection, validated by a volunteer medical worker at a free medical facility who'd provided them antibiotics, but cautioned they required stable housing shortly. Sarah was separating a single curved yellow fruit 4 methods when the knock arrived on the opening. Her core leaped. Authorities, child services. She'd transformed into an expert at detecting difficulty, at relocating before interrogations got requested. But the male positioned outside her operator's opening didn't appear formal. He wore a costly suit despite the early period, transported a hide briefcase, and possessed the variety of metallic hair that proposed corporate meeting chambers rather than squad vehicles. Sarah fractured the opening an inch. "Yes, Mrs. Sarah Martinez." His tone was refined, British accent gentle but existing. "Previously Sarah Hampton." The utilization of her maiden identity created her stomach tighten. Nobody had contacted her that in years. "Who's interrogating?" "My identity is James Worthington. I'm a senior associate at Worthington, Crane & Associates, international property lawyers." He retrieved out a business document, maintaining it where she could observe. "I've been attempting to position you for the previous 2 months. Might we communicate privately?" "My kids can absolutely remain existing. In reality, this involves them as well." He looked around the vacant area with a disapproval, though perhaps we could transfer to my bureau, or at minimum, somewhere warmer. I observed the tiny one appears unwell. Emma had commenced coughing once more, that harsh bark that created her complete frame tremble. Sarah's maternal reactions conflicted with her distrust, but the male's vision maintained genuine worry, and the location on his business document was in the financial sector, the variety of location that wouldn't waste occasion on elaborate schemes to steal from somebody who possessed nothing. "What's this regarding?" she questioned. "Your great-aunt Millicent Hampton." "I trust you recognized her as Aunt Millie," Sarah's respiration captured. Aunt Millie. She hadn't considered about her in years. The peculiar female who'd delivered birthday documents with $50 bills when Sarah was youthful, who'd worn fashioner suits to family outdoor meals, who'd vanished from their existences after Sarah's parents perished. "She deceased," Sarah's tone emerged smaller than planned. 2 months back. Tranquilly in her slumber at her residence in Switzerland. Worthington's expression gentled. She departed extremely particular directions regarding her property. "Mrs. Martinez, I genuinely must demand we examine this somewhere more suitable. Your kids appear frigid, 30 minutes subsequently." Sarah rested in a high chair that likely cost beyond her vehicle, observing her kids participate with a secretary's puzzle assortment in the Law Corporation's anticipation chamber. They'd progressed through the marble entrance in their mismatched donated garments, past security protectors who'd elevated eyebrows but stated nothing after Worthington's piercing observation. The bureau screamed ancient wealth, timber covering, genuine artwork, the variety of profound carpet that consumed footsteps. Sarah sensed like she was contaminating it simply by existing, despite Worthington's attempts to create her comfortable. Beverage. He dispensed without anticipating an answer, the porcelain cup delicate in her labor-coarsened palms. Now then, Millicent Hampton was, to be honest, an extraordinarily wealthy female. She constructed her wealth in pharmaceutical patents and real property, though she existed quite modestly by selection. Sarah recalled Millie's elementary living space from childhood explorations. Her practical garments. Nobody had suspected wealth. She never wedded, possessed no offspring. Worthington persisted. "When your parents perished, she attempted to obtain custody of you, but the tribunals granted you to your father's relative instead." "The Brennans," Sarah stated flatly. Another collection of hesitant protectors, though they'd been compassionate sufficient until she'd matured out of their obligation at 18. "Yes, Millicent never pardoned herself for failing to provide for you then. She maintained track of your existence, your wedding, your kids." He retrieved out a folder. "She was particularly enraged when she discovered of your present circumstances with your late spouse's parents." Warmth flooded Sarah's face. How did she? Millicent possessed resources. She employed a private detective to guarantee you were satisfactory. The reports from the previous 5 years created difficult examination. Sarah's palms tightened in her lap. The concept that somebody had been observing, recording her humiliation, created her sense exposed. She desired to intervene, Worthington stated tenderly. But you never requested assistance, never extended outward. She comprehended you'd decline charity, so she anticipated. Anticipated for what? For the conditions of her confidence to activate. He unsealed the folder, exposing documents blanketed in legal terminology. Millicent established an irrevocable confidence 15 years back. When you rotated 18, it was positioned to transfer to you upon her death, but solely if particular conditions were encountered. Sarah's oral cavity went arid. What conditions? That you were nurturing offspring of your personal, that you were in genuine requirement, and that you had displayed, in her statements, the resilience to tolerate hardship without losing your compassion. He grinned slightly. The detective's reports validated all 3 conditions extensively. I don't comprehend. What does this signify? Worthington retrieved out a single sheet of paper and positioned it before her. Sarah gazed at the digit, certain she was misinterpreting it. She calculated the zeros once, twice. 3 occasions. 150 million, the statements emerged as a murmur. 153,400,000 to be accurate, plus several properties, an art assortment, and various other assets. The total property value approaches 200 million. The chamber revolved. Sarah gripped the arms of her chair, certain she was hallucinating. Absence of slumber, stress, starvation. They could accomplish things to your intellect. That's impossible. I assure you, it's quite genuine. Worthington retrieved out more papers. There are also immediate provisions. An emergency fund of $500,000 will be transferred to your account presently. The complete property will eliminate probate within 6 to 8 weeks. Presently, Sarah's tone fractured. Within the period, if you provide banking information, though I suspect you'll desire to unseal fresh accounts. We can arrange that immediately. Sarah exploded into tears. Not tender tears, but profound, frame-trembling sobs that 5 years of suppressed emotion ultimately released. Worthington quietly proposed tissues and anticipated, his expression compassionate. My kids, she succeeded. They've been slumbering in a vehicle, consuming from nourishment banks. I couldn't even obtain medicine for Emma's cough. That concludes presently, he stated firmly. Millicent's directions were extremely clear. You and your kids are to desire for nothing ever once more. Through the crystal entrance, Sarah could observe her infants. Lucas was assisting Sophia with a puzzle while Emma observed, coiled in a chair, still coughing. They merited so considerably beyond she'd been capable to provide them. Why? She questioned. Why depart everything to me? We scarcely recognized each other. Worthington retrieved out a document, handwritten on costly stationery. She departed this for you. Sarah identified Millie's distinctive penmanship immediately. My most beloved Sarah. By the occasion you examine this, I'll be departed. And you'll be questioning why a distant relative departed you everything. The answer is elementary. You are the offspring I never possessed. The family I selected excessively late to claim. I observed from remoteness as you constructed an existence with Daniel. As you received your magnificent kids. As you confronted loss with elegance, I could never have succeeded. I observed as well as those who should have treasured you handled you harshly, and I was excessively considerably a coward to intervene directly. This wealth is not charity. It's not sympathy. It's justice. It's the existence you should have possessed if I'd been courageous sufficient to battle harder for you when your parents perished. It's the security your kids merit. It's the liberty to never once more acknowledge harshness in exchange for protection. Exist magnificently, my beloved one. Journey, discover, provide your kids everything, but predominantly provide them your occasion and affection. Obtain a residence with chamber for cackle. Never apologize for accepting up area in this universe, and if you consider of me, recall that even distant celestial bodies can adore the soil underneath. All my affection. Aunt Millie Sarah examined the document 3 occasions, tears streaming quietly down her expression. When she ultimately gazed upward, Worthington was extending a communication device. Perhaps you desire to create some contacts. Reserve a lodging for tonight. Request an appropriate meal. She accepted the communication device with quaking palms, then halted. Mr. Worthington, how lengthy have you been searching for me? 8 weeks. Your previous recognized location was… He paused delicately. My in-laws? Yes. They demanded they possessed zero comprehension of your location. Rather forcefully, I might add. A frigid burden settled in Sarah's stomach. 8 weeks. The Morrisons had comprehended about this bequest before they discarded her out. They'd comprehended and stated nothing. They comprehended, she murmured. Worthington's expression transformed grim. I suspected as considerably. They were quite eager to comprehend the details of Millicent's property. Claimed rights as your kids' protectors. When I clarified the bequest was yours alone, they transformed, agitated. Sarah's communication device, charging in the corner, abruptly exploded with notifications. She'd rotated it reverse on for the initial occasion in Sunrises. 47 missed contacts. 63 communications. All from digits she identified. Margaret, Robert, their lawyer. Their companions. With trembling appendages, she unsealed the most recent communication from Margaret. Sarah, there's been a dreadful miscomprehension. Please arrive residence immediately. The kids require their family. Another from Robert. We've been concerned sick. Where are our grandkids? Let's examine this like civilized individuals. And another. You possess zero authority to maintain them from us. We possess resources. Don't create this difficult. They comprehend, Sarah stated, her tone stronger now. Somehow they located out about the wealth, Worthington bobbed. Compact settlements converse. One of my junior associates was less than careful at his lodging bar previous darkness. I'm frightened statement journeys. Sarah's communication device rang. Margaret's identity flashed on the display. For a moment she contemplated not responding. Then she considered about 5 years of quietness. 5 years of consumed dignity, and struck acknowledge, Sarah. Margaret's tone was honey pleasant, a tone Sarah had never detected directed at her before. Appreciation to God. We've been frantic. Where are you, beloved? Don't contact me, beloved. A pause. I comprehend you're upset about our tiny disagreement, but surely you observe how you overreacted. Departing with the kids like that. We were simply about to contact the authorities. I'm with my lawyer, Sarah stated calmly. Examining my great-aunt's property. The quietness extended so lengthy, Sarah questioned if the contact had discontinued. Your property? Margaret's tone had thinned. Yes, the one you comprehended about when you discarded us out. The one you maintained hidden while my kids slumbered in a vehicle. Now, Sarah, let's not be theatrical. If we'd comprehended you possessed expectations… Expectations? Sarah's tone ascended. Lucas gazed upward from his puzzle, worry creasing his tiny expression. She compelled herself to respire. I possess zero expectations. I didn't comprehend about any of this until a period back. But you accomplished. You accomplished. A miscomprehension, Margaret stated rapidly. The lawyer, that British male, he wasn't clear. We considered he was searching for somebody else. But now that we comprehend, well, family should remain united. The kids require stability. Their residence. Their educational facility. The residence you discarded us out of? The educational facility you personally disenrolled them from? All reversible. Margaret's cackle was fragile. Water beneath the connection. Arrive residence, Sarah. We'll labor everything out. After all, supervising that variety of bequest. You'll require guidance, assistance, family sustenance. Like the sustenance you provided us these previous 5 years? Now you're being unfair. I'm being unfair. Sarah positioned, pacing to the opening. 21 levels underneath, the metropolis sprawled in sunrise sunlight. Hidden down present was the Walmart parking area where they'd slumbered. The religious building that provided them breakfast. The book repository where her kids had invested sunrises acting to examine while remaining comfortable. Mrs. Morrison, Sarah stated, utilizing the ceremonial title one final occasion. My kids consumed from garbage containers because you stated nourishment banks were for individuals who signified. My offspring's been sick for a month because you stated medical professionals were excessively costly for charity situations. We slumbered in a vehicle in freezing temperatures while you possessed 4 vacant sleeping chambers. Sarah, I'm not concluded. You informed my 6-year-old that her father perished because of me. You informed my boy he wasn't valuable of the Morrison identity. You created my offspring trust she was unadored because she possessed the audacity to be born female, hysterics, won't assist. And now that you comprehend I possess wealth, abruptly we're family. Abruptly you're concerned. Sarah's free palm tightened into a fist. I may have been frantic sufficient to acknowledge your harshness when I possessed nothing, but I will never, ever subject my kids to it once more. You can't simply sever us off. Margaret's covering ultimately deteriorated, exposing the metal underneath. Those are our grandkids, Daniel's kids. We possess rights. You possess nothing. Sarah's tone was ice. And if you arrive near my kids once more, I'll utilize every cent of my bequest to create certain you never abandon what you discarded away for the cost of your dignity. She terminated before Margaret could respond, her complete frame trembling with adrenaline and something that sensed hazardously like strength. Well accomplished, Worthington stated quietly. He'd been reviewing papers, politely acting not to attend. Though I should reference they may attempt legal action for grandparent rights. Let them attempt, he grinned. That's the spirit. Now shall we retrieve you and your kids somewhere appropriate? I've accepted the liberty of reserving a suite at the Four Seasons. Temporary, naturally, until you determine on more permanent arrangements. Sarah gazed through the crystal entrance at her kids. They were cackling at something, Emma's cough momentarily abandoned in joy. They possessed zero concept their existences had simply altered forever. Mr. Worthington, she reversed back to the lawyer. That emergency fund, can I access some of it presently? Like accurate now? Naturally. How considerably do you require? Sarah considered of Emma's medicine, of garments that accommodated, of beds with hygienic sheets and nourishment. That wasn't rationed. I desire to obtain my kids' midday meal at a genuine restaurant where they can request anything they desire. Worthington's professional covering fractured, exposing genuine warmth. I consider Millicent would have appreciated that extremely considerably. A period subsequently, Sarah rested in a restaurant she'd solely ever progressed past, observing her kids' vision expand at selections without costs. They were still in their donated garments, Lucas's jacket excessively tiny, Sophia's footwear maintained united with adhesive ribbon, but the server handled them like royalty. Likely appreciation to Worthington's quiet statement. Can I genuinely possess the pasta and the poultry tenders? Emma questioned, her tone hushed with astonishment. You can possess whatever you desire, infant, even sweet. Even sweet. As her kids debated between chocolate cake and frozen cream sundaes, why not both? She determined. Sarah's communication device buzzed with another communication, this occasion from Robert. We're prepared to be reasonable. 60-40 division of the kids' bequest. Beyond fair, contemplating our years of sacrifice, she eliminated it without responding. Then on impulse, she blocked both their digits. 5 years of their tones in her cranium was sufficient. Mommy. Lucas gazed upward from his selection, his expression earnest. Are we genuinely traveling to be acceptable now? Sarah extended across the table to accept his tiny palm. Yes, infant. We're traveling to be beyond acceptable. No more vehicle darknesses. No more vehicle darknesses. And Emma can observe a medical professional? The optimal medical professional. And we can travel to educational facility once more. Any educational facility you desire? Lucas contemplated this, then bobbed earnestly. Good, but I still desire to maintain my emergency provisions simply in situation. Sarah's core fractured a tiny more. Her 4-year-old boy had discovered excessively youthful that security could vanish overnight. It would accept occasion to undo that injury, to instruct him that some foundations didn't fragment. You can maintain whatever creates you sense protected, she guaranteed. But Lucas, we're never returning to that variety of frightened once more. That afternoon, while her kids napped in the lodging suite, an area larger than the complete underground they'd existed, in for 5 years, Sarah positioned at the surface-to-roof openings overlooking the metropolis. Worthington had departed her with a pile of papers. Bank accounts already established. Credit documents arriving by courier. The machinery of wealth clicking into motion with stunning efficiency. She delivered a single electronic correspondence to everybody at the Morrison property auction business where Margaret participated, Queen Bee among the civilization spouses. Simply considered you should comprehend. Margaret and Robert Morrison discarded their 3 grandkids onto the pavements 3 weeks back to slumber in a vehicle. They comprehended about my bequest when they accomplished it. Appreciate your charity auctions. Petty, perhaps. Satisfying? Absolutely. Her communication device rang. Unknown digit. She nearly didn't respond, then identified the area designation from the Law Corporation. Mrs. Martinez, this is Jennifer Crane, Mr. Worthington's associate. I'm contacting about the additional provisions of your aunt's will. Additional provisions? Yes, I'm frightened we've simply located another clause. It appears your aunt was quite thorough. She established a separate confidence, particularly for legal action against anyone who had caused you injury. She contacted it the Justice Fund. 10 million earmarked exclusively for, and I quote, demolishing those who err compassion for weakness. Sarah descended onto the plush sofa, cackling until tears arrived. Even in death, Aunt Millie was battling for her. Outside, the sun was positioning over an altered universe. This sunrise, she'd been rationing fuel and curved yellow fruit slices. Tonight, her kids slumbered in comfortable beds with occupied stomachs and a future vivid with potential. Tomorrow, she'd commence constructing their fresh existence. She'd locate a genuine residence with a cultivation area for Lucas's experiments and barriers for Emma's artwork and area for Sophia's dance rehearsal. She'd locate educational facilities that would nurture instead of merely tolerate. She'd discover how to be wealthy without losing herself. But tonight she simply rested in the assembling obscurity. Attending to her kids respire easily for the initial occasion in weeks, and murmured an appreciation to a distant aunt who'd adored from remoteness, but adored fiercely. The Morrisons considered they'd fractured her. Instead, they'd liberated her. And Sarah Martinez, heir to a wealth she'd never envisioned, was ultimately prepared to halt existing and commence living. 6 months had elapsed since Sarah Martinez discovered about her bequest. 6 months of alteration so complete that occasionally she captured her reflection in store openings and didn't identify the female-gazing reverse, not because of the fashion of garments Worthington's assistant had assisted her select, or the healthy radiance that arrived from regular meals and appropriate rest. It was the method she transported herself now, spine direct, shoulders reverse. The posture of somebody who no longer apologized for existing. The Georgian structure she'd obtained rested on 12 plots simply outside the metropolis. Distant sufficient from the Morrisons' civilization circle, but near sufficient to good educational facilities. 22 chambers, a carriage residence, cultivation areas that bloomed with intention. But it was the tiny touches that signified most. Lucas's science laboratory in the renovated barn, Emma's art workshop with north-confronting openings, Sophia's dance surface with mirrors that reflected her joy reverse infinitely. This sunrise, Sarah positioned in her residence bureau, still strange to consider those statements, reviewing applications. 347 so distant, each one a narrative of a mother in emergency. The Sarah Martinez Foundation for Females and Kids had solely been operational for 2 months. But statements spread swift among the frantic. Mama! Emma materialized in the entrance. No longer the wheezing, delicate youngster from the vehicle, but still tender-cored. There's a female at the entrance. She claims she comprehends you. Sarah looked at the security monitor and froze. Margaret Morrison positioned at the entrance, somehow smaller than recollection proposed. Her perfect gray hair displayed roots. Her fashioner suit dangled loose on her structure. Should I inform her to depart? Emma questioned, examining her mother's tension. Sarah studied her offspring's expression. Here was the examination she'd been preparing for. The instruction she'd attempted to instruct through actions rather than statements. That resilience wasn't the absence of compassion, but the intelligence to comprehend when to extend it. No, infant, let her in, but remain near to your brother and sister. Emma bobbed and operated off, her footsteps resonating through corridors that had never recognized harshness. Sarah accepted a profound respiration and progressed to the entrance. Each step evaluated and intentional. Margaret positioned on the limestone steps like a supplicant at a temple. When she observed Sarah, something flickered across her expression. Humiliation, perhaps, or simply the identification of reversed fortunes. Sarah, her tone fractured on the identity. Appreciation for observing me, Mrs. Morrison. Sarah maintained her tone neutral. professional. The female who'd previously created her, utilized ceremonial title didn't merit the intimacy of her initial identity. Margaret swayed slightly. Up near, Sarah could observe the signals. Weight loss, quaking palms. The specific exhaustion that arrived from dignity wrestling with desperation. I require to communicate with you about Robert. Is he sick? Bankrupt. The statement descended between them like a rock. We're bankrupt. The residence is in foreclosure. His investments were all connected to a development transaction that deteriorated. We've lost everything, Sarah anticipated. 5 years of presenting breakfast in quietness had instructed her patience. I've arrived to request. Margaret halted, consumed, attempted once more. To plead for assistance. Not for me. I comprehend I don't merit, but Robert had a stroke previous month. The medical expenses without protection, her composure ultimately fractured. We're being evicted subsequent week. The irony was so dense Sarah could taste it. The identical female who'd discarded her grandkids onto the pavement now positioned pleading for protection. Karma, as Aunt Millie would have stated, possessed excellent aim. Where are you remaining now? My vehicle. Margaret's cackle was harsh. Rather appropriate, isn't it? Though mine's not covered for, so I suppose they'll accept that as well. Sarah could deliver her away. God comprehended she possessed every authority. One statement and security would escort Margaret off the land, departing her to locate precisely how frigid a vehicle obtained at darkness, how starvation transformed into a continuous companion, how rapidly dignity dissolved when existence was all that signified. Mommy, Lucas materialized with perfect timing, as if the cosmos desired to remind her what signified. Miss Janet from the Foundation is present for the interview. Sarah looked between her boy and the fractured female on her entrance. In that moment, she created a selection that would characterize not simply who she was, but who her kids would transform into. Inform her, I'll be present in 5 minutes. And Lucas requested Maria to arrange the blue visitor chamber. His vision expanded slightly, but he bobbed and vanished. Margaret's cranium rotated upward sharply. Sarah, you'll remain present tonight. Tomorrow we'll examine conditions. Sarah's tone was metal wrapped in silk. Comprehend this, Margaret. I'm not accomplishing this for you. I'm accomplishing it because my kids are observing, and I desire them to discover that elegance isn't weakness. But there will be conditions. Margaret bobbed rapidly, tears ultimately pouring over. Anything. I'll accomplish anything. You'll labor at the Foundation, not as a board member or consultant, but in the protection, sanitizing, preparing, whatever is required. You'll exist in the carriage residence. It's tiny but comfortable. You'll possess zero statement in my kids' existences unless they select to invite you in. And you'll participate therapy weekly to comprehend why you handled your boy's family like laborers instead of souls. Yes. The statement emerged, strangled. Yes to all of it. And Margaret, if you ever communicate to my kids the method you utilize too, if you create them, sense tiny or unwanted for even a moment, you'll depart with nothing but the garments on your reverse. Are we clear? Crystal. Sarah advanced aside, permitting Margaret into a residence constructed on the exact wealth she'd attempted to conceal. As the older female passed, Sarah captured her arm tenderly. Robert can arrive as well when he's satisfactory sufficient. Identical conditions. Margaret's sob was answer sufficient. That night, after Margaret had been nourished and settled, Sarah located her kids in the family chamber, an area designed for joy with oversized sofas and barriers blanketed in their artwork. They gazed upward as she entered, expressions occupied with interrogations. Why is grandmother present? Emma questioned directly. At 7, she'd developed a fierce protectiveness over their fresh existence. Sarah rested among them, drawing Sophia onto her lap. Because occasionally, individuals require assistance. Even individuals who weren't compassionate to us. But she was spiteful, Lucas stated, disapproving. She created you sob. She discarded us out. Yes, she accomplished. And those were dreadful things. But here's what I desire you to comprehend. Sarah selected her statements meticulously. Maintaining onto anger is like maintaining a warm coal. It incinerates us beyond anyone else. Grandmother is sick with regret now. She's discovering what we already comprehend, that wealth isn't residence, that dignity isn't affection, so we pardon her. Sophia questioned, twirling a strand of hair around her appendage. We select compassion. Forgiveness might arrive subsequently, or it might not. But we can be compassionate without abandoning. We can assist without confiding completely. Does that create sense? Emma bobbed gradually. Like how we nourish the stray feline but don't permit it internal because it might scratch. Something like that, yes. Lucas was silent for a moment, then stated, I desire to display her my science laboratory. But solely if she guarantees not to claim intelligent boys don't waste occasion on experiments. Sarah's throat tightened. Her boy recalled every slicing statement, yet still possessed chamber for aspiration. That's your selection, infant. And if she claims anything like that, you inform me immediately. The weeks that pursued examined every instruction Sarah attempted to instruct. Margaret, genuine to her statement, labored in the Foundation's protection without protest. She presented meals to females who reminded her of what Sarah had been, frantic, exhausted, clutching to kids and dignity with equal desperation. She sanitized washrooms and organized donations and gradually, agonizingly, commenced to comprehend the burden of what she'd accomplished. Robert arrived a month subsequently, wheelchair-bound and silent. The stroke had accepted his speech but not his comprehension. He observed his grandkids from a remoteness, tears sliding down his expression when Lucas ultimately neared with an elementary mechanical toy he'd constructed. I considered you might appreciate to observe, Lucas stated quietly. Mom claims you utilized to construct things as well before you obtained excessively significant. Robert's good palm quaked as he acknowledged the toy, examining it with an engineer's vision. He gazed upward at Sarah, and she observed it present, the identification of what dignity had cost him. The comprehension that arrived excessively late. The Foundation expanded exponentially. Sarah had employed experts to operate it appropriately, but she demanded on being existing, on comprehending every family they assisted. The protection could residence 25 families, with youngster supervision, position preparation, legal assistance, everything she'd required and never possessed. You can't rescue everybody, Worthington cautioned during one of their gatherings. The requirement is endless. I'm not attempting to rescue everybody, Sarah replied, signing payments for the Foundation's expansion. I'm attempting to rescue the ones in entrance of me. Aunt Millie rescued me by observing me. That's all any of us can accomplish. Observe individuals. Genuinely observe them. And respond. One night, Sarah was reviewing applications when Emma knocked on her bureau entrance. Mom, there's something incorrect with grandmother. Sarah located Margaret in the protection cooking area, sobbing over a pile of intake documents. She gazed upward as Sarah entered, mascara streaming down her expression. She still wore cosmetics daily, ancient habits perishing difficult. This one, she maintained upward a document with trembling palms. Single mother. 3 kids existing in their vehicle. The location she recorded for previous residents. Margaret could scarcely retrieve the statements out. It's my residence. She's the sanitizing female I terminated for accepting residents' remaining nourishment. I accused her of stealing and possessed her arrested. She lost her living space because of the arrest document. Her kids. Sarah rested beside the female who'd previously towered over her. Her kids, Margaret, are slumbering in a vehicle because of me, because I couldn't tolerate the consideration of the assistants consuming my garbage. The sob that tore from her throat was primal. How many others? How many families did I demolish without even comprehending their identities? Sarah could propose platitudes, could minimize the injury. Instead, she communicated reality. I don't comprehend. But you can't alter what you accomplished. You can solely alter what you accomplish subsequent. I desire to sponsor her family personally, cover for their housing, education, whatever they require, anonymously. She shouldn't have to observe me to pardon me. I require to repair this. Sarah studied the female who'd invested 5 years fracturing her downward. The fashionable garments were departed, replaced by practical protection attire. The perfect hair displayed gray throughout. The palms that had previously struck her now presented meals to the frantic. It wasn't sufficient. Would never be sufficient. But it was a commencement. I'll arrange it, Sarah stated. But Margaret, This sensation you possess accurate now, this crushing burden of comprehending how considerably injury you've caused, maintain onto it. Let it instruct you. Let it alter you, because that's the solely redemption any of us retrieve, the selection to be superior than we were. As winter neared, the foundation arranged for its initial major fundraiser. Sarah had resisted the concept of celebrations and civilization gatherings, but her board persuaded her that sustainable financing required participating the competition. Fine, she'd conceded. But we accomplish it distinctly. No $1,000 tickets. No exclusive visitor catalogs. We invite everybody, donors, protection residents, volunteers. We display the metropolis what society actually resembles. The darkness of the gathering, the foundation's principal corridor altered. Emma's artwork decorated the barriers alongside fragments created by protection kids. Lucas provided science demonstrations to delighted crowds. Sophia executed a dance routine with other females from the Foundation's after-educational facility schedule. Sarah positioned near the entrance, greeting visitors in an elementary dark dress when she observed a recognizable figure hovering outside. Janet Chen, the female Margaret had demolished, positioned with her 3 kids. Invitation clutched in her palm, but terror maintaining her frozen. Sarah progressed out to encounter her. "Miss Chen, I'm so content you could arrive. We weren't certain." Janet's vision darted around, searching for threats. "You belong present," Sarah stated firmly. "You and your kids. This is your society as well." As they progressed and united, Sarah captured Margaret observing from across the chamber where she was presenting beverages. Their vision encountered and Margaret's expression fragmented. She reversed away rapidly, but not before Sarah observed the profundity of her remorse. The night progressed with the variety of chaos that arrived from combining kids, donors, and survivors in one area. It was messy, noisy, imperfect, and absolutely accurate. When Sarah accepted the platform to communicate, she gazed out at the crowd and observed her personal voyage reflected reverse in a dozen expressions. "6 months back," she commenced, "my kids and I slumbered in our vehicle. We consumed from nourishment banks. We existed on the compassion of outsiders and the stubbornness that occasionally passes for resilience. Presently we position present not because we're particular, but because somebody observed us. Because somebody trusted we signified." She located her kids in the crowd, their expressions vivid with dignity. This foundation isn't about charity. It's about identification. It's about comprehending that the boundary between housed and houseless, between secure and frantic, is thinner than most individuals desire to acknowledge. It's about constructing connections instead of barriers. Her gaze landed on Margaret and Robert positioned quietly at a reverse table. It's also about redemption. About comprehending that individuals can alter, that harshness can alter into compassion, that the identical palms that force others downward can discover to elevate them upward. The speech persisted, but Sarah's core was already progressing past statements to action. After the gathering, as families streamed out with occupied stomachs and fuller cores, she located Margaret sanitizing upward alone. "You could have departed this to the staff," Sarah observed. Margaret persisted, stacking chairs. "I locate I consider superior when my palms are occupied. A fresh experience for me." They labored in quietness for a moment before Margaret communicated once more. "I've been observing the therapist you suggested. She claims I reversed my sorrow over Daniel into harshness, that I punished you for accepting him away, even though all you accomplished was adore him." Sarah stated nothing, simply persisted sanitizing. "She's incorrect, though," Margaret persisted. "I wasn't punishing you for accepting him. I was punishing you for being valuable of him when I'd invested so lengthy in forming him he wasn't valuable of us." The statements dangled in the atmosphere between them, heavy with reality. "He was, though," Margaret's tone fractured. "Valuable. He was the optimal of us, and I couldn't observe it until it was excessively late. Until you were all I possessed remaining of him, and I operated you away as well." Sarah positioned down the chair she was maintaining and genuinely gazed at the female across from her. "Margaret, can I interrogate you something?" "Anything. What was Daniel like as a youngster?" Margaret's expression altered. "Oh, he was sunshine, constantly constructing things. constantly interrogating why. He'd transport resident strays, felines, canines. Once a pigeon with a fractured wing. His father detested it, claimed it created him gentle. She grinned through tears. But Daniel never halted. He possessed this method of observing injured things and desiring to repair them. He never informed me that, Sarah stated gently. He claimed you wouldn't desire to discuss about his childhood. I couldn't. Because discussing about who he was signified acknowledging what we'd attempted to create him transform into. Margaret encountered her vision. I observe him, you comprehend. In Lucas's focus, in Emma's core, in Sophia's joy. I observe the boy I attempted to alter, and I'm so thankful you didn't permit me alter them as well. Sarah sensed the final of her anger dissolve, not into forgiveness. That would accept more occasion, but into comprehension. They were all fractured individuals attempting to heal, all progressing wounded, attempting to accomplish superior. Inform me more, she stated. Inform me about the Daniel I never retrieved to comprehend. They conversed until dawn. Two females bound by loss and gradually, meticulously constructing something fresh from the ruins. A year subsequently, Sarah positioned in the Foundation's expanded facility, observing the sunrise rush. 50 families now contacted the protection residents temporarily while they reconstructed their existences. The position preparation schedule had positioned over 100 individuals in sustainable careers. The kids' after-educational facility schedule presented 200 youngsters. Emma operated the art therapy sessions for younger kids, her natural empathy creating her a favorite among the protection youngsters. Lucas tutored mathematics and science, patiently clarifying concepts to kids who descended behind during their houseless periods. Sophia instructed dance classes, demanding that joy was as essential as nourishment. Margaret had transformed into the Foundation's most dedicated volunteer, laboring 60 period weeks without protest. She'd auctioned her jewelry to sponsor families, existed modestly in the carriage residence, and gradually acquired the weary respect of the females she presented. Robert, regaining speech through therapy, examined narratives to kids in his halting tone, his personal fracturedness creating him tender with theirs. Miss Sarah, a fresh resident, neared hesitantly. I desired to appreciate you for all this, for providing us an opportunity. We provide each other opportunities, Sarah corrected tenderly. That's all any of us can accomplish. That afternoon, positioning in the cultivation area with her kids, Sarah retrieved out a worn package, Aunt Millie's document, creased from re-examining. Why do you maintain examining that? Emma questioned. To recall, Sarah stated. To recall that affection can extend across remoteness and occasion. That what appears like a conclusion can be a commencement. That even when we consider we're alone, somebody might be observing, anticipating for the accurate moment to alter everything. Like you accomplish for the families present, Lucas observed. Like we all accomplish for each other, Sarah corrected. Even grandmother and grandfather are discovering that now. I consider Dad would be content, Sophia stated abruptly. That we're all united, even if it's distinct than before. Sarah drew her kids near, respiring in their warmth, their potential, their proof that affection could overcome nearly anything. I consider he would be as well, infant. I consider he would be as well. As the sun positioned over the property that had transformed into a shelter for so many, Sarah Martinez comprehended that bequest wasn't genuinely about wealth. It was about what you accomplished with what you were provided, whether that was millions of dollars or merely the opportunity to commence once more. She'd been transferred both. And with her kids beside her and her society around her, she was constructing something that would endure distant longer than any wealth, an inheritance of compassion, a tradition of observing individuals, a persistent trust that nobody was past redemption, even the ones who had discarded her away. Especially them, because ultimately that's what alteration genuinely signified. Not simply altering your personal existence, but establishing area for others to alter theirs. The Sarah Martinez Foundation for Females and Kids would exceed them all. A testament to the reality that occasionally the exact experience is intended to fracture us transform into the foundation for something unbreakable, and hidden in whatever arrived after this existence. Millicent Hampton and Daniel Morrison were grinning.